Welcome to the North Olympic Library System's presentation of Be FireWise at Home. We are fortunate to have two representatives from the Washington State Department of Natural Resources here with us to talk about reducing wildfire risk at home. And in addition to our presenters, we also have a few crew members from Clallam County Fire District 3 in the audience. So we extend a big welcome and thank you to all the fire personnel here with us today. Our presenters are Michael Becker, the Straits District Fire Unit Manager, and Raleigh Davis, a Service Forestry Specialist. Michael and Raleigh, welcome, and thanks to the both of you for joining us this evening.
Thanks very much, Karina. I'll go ahead and get started here. I'll share my screen and we can jump into the presentation. I'm gonna be talking for about 30 minutes, I think, and then Raleigh has a blurb about what he does in relation to this for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then I'm hoping to have some good discussion and time for questions. If any clarifying questions come up, if I'm not explaining something well, please throw it in the chat, and if it's still not making sense, just get my attention, turn your mic on. Oh, and just a little more housekeeping. Can anyone not hear me okay? Does anybody need me to adjust volume or anything? Doing good. Okay. And can everyone see the creating defensible space in the wildland urban interface screen? Excellent. So go ahead and roll into here. So real quick, you might be thinking like SQUIM, the North Olympic Peninsula, urban doesn't necessarily apply to us, but really what the wildland urban interface is referring to is anywhere that undeveloped land is meeting development. So even a single home structure adjacent to forested land in the fire realm, we're considering that the wildland urban interface, or I might slip and call it the WUI. That's just how we refer to it in the fire realm. At the conclusion of my program, I'll go over a little bit of what we have on staff for the Department of Natural Resources Olympic Region Fire Program. Yeah, we'll go over here. So let's see. So a few quick facts we'll get into. We'll talk about the home ignition zones adjacent to your structure. Discuss some ideas for what kind of plants are good for around home. The FireWise USA program. And yep, I pretty much covered the rest of that. So looking at these two fires, these are going on nearly 3.5 years old now. These two fires were from the 2020 firestorm, Bad Malden fire, Malden, Washington. You can see it's a little over 15,000 acres, 121 homes. It's indicating primary residence lost, 8 commercial buildings, 94 other structures, outbuilding, barns, those kinds of things, pump houses. The Echo Mountain Complex fire in Lincoln, Oregon, 2,522 acres and 300 residential structures lost, 1,200 total structures lost. So Lincoln City, Oregon, more metropolitan area than Malden, Washington. So much smaller fire by acres, but almost triple the residents lost, residential structures, and many more total structures lost. So these are concerns with the WUI, and a lot of folks that were around here probably remember that Labor Day firestorm around here. Those kind of east wind events typically occur around that time of year here towards fall. And those are really dangerous for us in the fire realm because it's towards the end of summer. That's our dry season, obviously. It's warmer, drier, and those east winds are pushing even more dry, warm air off the continental US. It's not coming from the sea with that ocean moisture. It's very dry. And so it continues to preheat the fuel. And once there's a fire started, it's very difficult for us to put it out effectively while the winds are pushing it. So that's where this presentation is helpful, because there are things you can do to make your home safer in events like this. So more homes are being built in the wildland urban interface. For 2 million properties are at risk wildfire in the West. Human-caused fires are increasing. That's not just due to carelessness. You know, Smokey Bear has been around now 80 years. He's done too good of a job, if anything, in suppressing wildfire. That's part of the issue, is we've got all this additional fuel loading. It's less of an issue in our neck of the woods because the Olympic Peninsula, you know, we grow trees here, and we grow lots of them. There's just tons and tons of organic material growing on the peninsula, and that's its natural state. But in eastern Washington, the ponderosa dominated forests, they're overstocked because of the fire suppression. Now, just because Western Washington is more used to having more vegetation naturally, doesn't exempt us from fire. Historically, like prehistorically, before records were kept, there were stand replacement fires, lightning caused. There were also fire management by indigenous tribes. There's oral record and things like that. They manage the land for hunting and gathering, this kind of thing. So fire still exists around here. It's just it naturally occurs on a longer rotation. Another human cause factor is our infrastructure is getting old. There's been a lot in the news about the power companies in California and more recently Hawaii. We're not exempt from that either. I'm sure folks have seen, if you're driving around in the rural roads, some of the power lines that are just, it seems like being held up by the vegetation growing around them. So these are things we need to be watching out for and ideally correcting in the near future. There's also the matter of climate change. Generally, things are becoming hotter, drier around here. Our what am I trying to say? The wet events are happening. We're getting more moisture, more concentrated times and less over a longer period of time. So these things are all affecting us negatively in terms of our ability to keep fires small and manageable. So this picture we're going to come back to again and again throughout this presentation. And here you've got your residence, primary residence, and then your outbuilding, your garage. And this first zone, I don't know how clear the image is to folks at home, but the red line, it's indicating the immediate zone, and that's 0 to 5 feet from your structure. The orange line out here is the intermediate zone. That's 5 to 30 feet from your structure. And then the darker green line out here is 30 to 100 feet from your structure. Okay. So yeah, first let's talk about access to your home. So this is a good example of how to indicate your street address, because in the unfortunate event that you do have a wildfire threatening your property, you want to be able to have us know where to go. The responders know where to find your house. So here they're showing that house number mounted clearly, all kinds of specs here. And then if there are multiple homes on a single driveway, make sure there's an address located on each house. So now, in terms of the driveway, it really helps us because our machines, our apparatus are large. It helps if your driveway is easy for us to get down. And it's even more helpful if there's a good turnaround at the end, because we get really nervous if we're going down something narrow and brushed in like this. If we get to the end of your lane where your house is, and we have to do the kind of the Austin Powers turn, the 24-point turn where we're just going back, forth, that takes a lot of time. And if we're in an emergency situation, we always want to be parking to get out quickly. So we always turn around before we get out and start work. So that in case things start to go the wrong direction, we can get out quickly. So if we're unable to do that, we'll try to mitigate for that by clearing a space. But best case scenario, these things are done before we arrive, before the emergency, right? The prevention is worth an ounce of the cure, you know, the adage. Something I always like to add to this, it's not on the slide, but if you have a lane with a culvert anywhere, it's a good idea to have those little lollipop reflectors or some T-posts, something marking the area of the culvert, because we're coming in at night or something and we crush an edge of your culvert, that's going to be potentially bad for us, for our vehicle, but worse for you in the long run. You're going to have to replace a culvert probably. And I just wouldn't want to do that to anybody. If you have a bridge, what is the weight limit on that bridge? A lot of do-it-yourselfers in the peninsula, and I appreciate that. But yeah, if you're engineering things just for your pickup to get across, it's going to be challenging or impossible for us to get some of our apparatus, like a water tender, across. We just won't do it, which will make our response more difficult and put your structure at higher risk. So these are things to be aware of in terms of wildfire response. Okay, so coming back to this image, our house with the immediate zone, 0 to 5 feet. So we're going to want to remove things that are vulnerable to ignition by embers. Many homes that are lost in wildfires are not actually impacted by the main fire itself. It's ember wash from the fire will get into receptive fuels on the house, like this leaf litter in the gutter is an excellent example. You can see the needle cast as well. It's a little out of focus, but it's on the shingles there. And so ember gets established in here, and now your house is on fire, even though you have this great little fire break here with the gravel walkway. They've got a wood pile adjacent to the house. We call that a jackpot of fuel, because if an ember gets established in there, that's, you know, you heat your home with wood, that's a lot of heat. And so that's all going off in one swoop in mid-August or September. it's not good. There are several good things about this home in this image. I don't want to discount those. The metal roof is excellent. It looks like it's got really good flashing around the windows and on the eaves and stuff. So those are some things that homeowner has done well. They need to move their wood pile. And then earlier I'd mentioned the fuel break with the gravel pathway. So they're keeping their grass mowed down low. It's green. It's under 4 inches. And this gravel path, we could have a fire pushing and burn this grass out here, but it won't burn the rocks. So that'll help. Yeah, this is a pretty common thing around the peninsula, is to see trees growing on to homes. We're going to want to trim those back 5 to 10 feet. And that's not to say you can't have a tree right next to the house. It's just, is it tall enough that you can keep the branches 5 to 10 feet away from the roof? You know, a lot of people love living in the forest, and that's great, but yeah, we want to be keeping those branches a safe distance from the roof, and then making sure the roof is in good repair, clean, no moss growing on it. That moss, when it's wet and saturated, it's not a concern for fire, but it dries out quickly, and then it carries fire really readily, and it's so light it'll float away or to another place on fire and carry fire with it. Here's a big one, are the vents on your attic and crawl spaces. You like the mesh screen, 1/8 of an inch on those to keep the embers out. And then under the porch, we all like the area under the porch to keep our project wood dry and stuff. Well, that becomes a receptive bed for embers. A nice dry wood we're saving for the project. So these are things to keep in mind. Some immediate zone plants. Ideally, the amount of vegetation is limited in this zone. And then there's some fire resistant species that we could plant here. The characteristics, they hold high moisture during the summer months and produce small amounts of litter. They're small and compact and low to the ground. And then beauty bark is really common around here, and I'm not going to say you shouldn't use it, but some things you can do to help diminish the risk, because it will carry fire. It will become receptive when it gets dry enough, but if you mix it with some rock like pebbles and stuff, it's less so. There's just less woody material there. It's easier for us to deal with in those cases. And then this last point is avoid conifer species next to the home. So a lot of evergreen shrub species, they don't self prune, but they'll have die off underneath. And so the outer parts are nice and green, evergreen. But inside it's got a lot of dead material, and it will shed eventually. But that needle cast under it is a jackpot of fuel. It'll burn, and it'll burn hot. So hot and fast, generally, those conifer species burn. Here's some examples. Ground cover, gray sward, hardy ice, creeping thyme, some annuals, geranium, petunias, and pansies. Moving out to the intermediate zone, the 5 to 30 foot area. We're gonna remove any dead grass foliage. We'll mow grass to a max height of 4 inches. clear vegetation away from propane tanks, creating fuel breaks through paths and driveways. Like here, these rocks, they're not going to burn. And then planting in clusters and islands and not continuous masses. This recommends keeping trees spaced 18 foot apart. This FireWise information, it's a one size fits all. It's a national program. And so the 18 foot apart spacing is a guideline for national, and it's not necessarily most applicable to us. I mean, if we wanted to follow this to the T, we could end up having kind of parking lot areas. But everything's a cost benefit analysis, right? So we want to be limbing those trees up so that if there is fire, we can keep it out of the crown of the tree. So we're limbing the trees 5 to 10 foot from the ground. Kind of the same spec as off the roof. We're trying to keep the limbs away from that ground fire. Some plants are the blue star, camellias, and cranesbill. Those are high moisture through the summer. A few other plants are the lilac, the snowberry, ocean spray, and rhododendron. And I don't know if lilac are native. I don't think so, but I believe snowberry, ocean spray, and rhododendron are native species to the Olympic Peninsula. There's also native oak trees. There are native cherry trees as well, and maple too. So there's some good trees for the properties that you can use, considering that intermediate zone. Then moving on to the extended zone. In the national program, they recommend a spacing of 10 foot between trees or in small groupings. For us, it's going to be that more small groupings, and yeah, we're just consider limbing, really. I mean, if you're living in a wooded area on the Olympic Peninsula, the chances of having a 10-foot spacing between trees are pretty slim. But that's where removing the ladder fuels is huge. And by ladder fuels, I just mean the lower limbs on the trees, shrubs around the trees that are touching the lower limbs. If you can prune those back, that's going to help out a lot. Yeah, keeping your vegetation, kind of applying to your outbuildings the same immediate zone stuff. So not having plants growing up right onto them or limbs touching the roofs. That's going to help us protect your structure. Then creating shaded fuel breaks. I think Raleigh's going to touch on that again later. So here's an example of that tree spacing. This again is the national guideline. So I just suggest taking that with a grain of salt for the Olympic Peninsula. So this is the Chip Ross fire. It's in Corvallis, Oregon, a few years back. And these images are a good example. They're showing the black area is the burned area. And then just how close it got to these structures, these apartment buildings. So this was a grassy field, several grassy fields, and the fire just, that's a very light, flashy, receptive fuel. It was cured up. You can see it's kind of brown in the surrounding areas. So once fire got established, it it went through very quickly, but responders were able to keep the fire from impacting the structures beyond just a little heat damage. But it's a close call. So I can think of some of the apartments in Squim or towards the east side, just north of 101, that there's some fields adjacent to, and I would hate to see something like this happen around there, but I can kind of transpose this image locally. We're not immune to stuff like this. I guess that's my point. So FireWise USA is a voluntary recognition program that helps homeowners and neighborhoods get organized, develop a plan to increase ignition resistance of their home. And there's a link to the website, and I can share that with Karina, who will put it up on the library page. There's a few steps to being recognized as a FireWise community. So your homeowners association can create a board or committee to represent the community. This includes local residents, as well as forestry agencies like the Department of Natural Resources and the local fire department. So the board defines a boundary, and then we do a wildfire risk assessment. And the assessment is a collaboration with residents, DNR, and the fire department. And then a multi-year action plan is created to identify risks and, more importantly, mitigate them. Every year, members complete educational and risk reduction actions. And then you report on those to maintain the certification. So here's a few resources for that I'll share. Karina. And through the Washington Department of Natural Resources, we do offer defensible space and defensible space inspections. You can contact me. There's my email. Typically, our preferred time to do these are in the later fall, winter, or early spring. As we move into fire season, it becomes really difficult for us to do stuff like this. We just get very busy with fire response. So real quick, I'll talk a little about the state fire resources on the peninsula, and that's the Department of Natural Resources. So we have 9 fully staffed Type 5 engines dispersed through Clallam, Jefferson, and Grays Harbor counties. Those Type 5 engines have just over 400 gallons of water on them. You may have seen them driving around. They are like a Super Duty Ford pickup, a crew cab Ford pickup with a flatbed on it and a pump. Each engine comes staffed with an engine leader and 3 firefighters. Olympic Region also has 9 fire-trained 10-person offender crews based out of the Olympic Corrections Camp in Forks, Washington. So each crew comes with 10 crew members and 1 overhead crew boss. And so when there are wildfires, we'll bring an engine or 2 engines to the wildfire, and oftentimes we'll order the hand crews. And those guys come from the Olympic Corrections Camp, and they do a lot of hard work. They dig line and put water on the fire and stuff, and help support us in our engine operations. For fire staff, overhead staff, we have Mark Kincaid and Morgan Reisdorfer in Grays Harbor County. We have Jordan Hamrick and Felipe Berrigan in West Clallam and West Jefferson County, out towards Forks. Myself and David Taylor in East Clallam and East Jefferson County. DNR also has several aviation resources. We have several Type 2 helicopters available for initial attack. those helicopters move around quite a bit through the summer, but generally they're located approximately 1 hour away from us. And that's generally in Olympia or around Mount Vernon. So Department of Natural Resources, we protect private and state land in Clallam, Jefferson, and Grays Harbor counties. We have stations in Forks out here, Port Angeles, where I am, Chimicum, and Aberdeen. Forks staffs 3 engines, Port Angeles staffs 2 engines, Chimicum staffs 1 engine, and Aberdeen has 3 engines. And I should clarify, those engines are staffed through summer seasonally. So generally we're fully staffed June 16th through September 30th, depending on the severity of the season. Sometimes we stay fully staffed through October. It just depends on our employees' availability and the severity of the season. So to report a wildfire on state land, always you can call 911, or if you're comfortable, if it's not running and you're not in fear of it getting into high danger immediately, you can call this 1-800 number that goes to the Department of Natural Resources. Here is the Olympic Region Dispatch that's out of Forks, and dispatch notifies the fire staff, and we begin the mobilization process from there. If there's an obvious origin of where the fire started, please protect it as much as possible to help our investigators. There are people that start fires on purpose, unfortunately, and so the more evidence we can keep safe, the better chance we'll have of finding them. First priority is always personal and public safety. So do not prioritize protecting the origin if your safety is at risk. Take care of yourself first. Yeah, and there's some sources, and I will turn it over to Raleigh now. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Michael. That was great. Hopefully I can touch up on some of the stuff you mentioned, like the shaded fuel break and well, some other stuff here that's related to what you were talking about. But yeah, I'm Raleigh Davis. I've been with the DNR for about 2 years now, just under 2 years. So I still have a lot to learn. So forgive me if I miss any details during this talk. I'll try to cover everything that I feel is important enough to share with you. And the gist of what I'll talk about is the service forestry program that I represent. And as Karina mentioned, I'm a service forestry specialist. That's like a service forester in training. So don't get fooled by that specialist title. That's nothing special about it. But anyway, this program, it ties into a lot of fuels reduction practices, which is why it's relevant to today's topic. And again, I'll talk about that, but just some background about it. It's relatively new in Western Washington, and it was born from House Bill 1168, which was, there's a lot of talk about it in the years prior to 2019, but it was enacted in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And then in 2020, that's when management was hired on. And then the following year, service foresters were hired on, and then specialists as well. So again, a relatively new program. Eastern Washington, they've been, well, this program has been alive over there for 20 plus years now, because of course, Eastern Washington, they live with, it's just something they live with, you know, the idea and the reality of fire. It's a part of their climate, and their bioregion, if you will. Fires break out a lot more over there, so there was a lot more of a need for it in Eastern Washington. And as we've all experienced, we've had a few hotter, drier summers the last few years, and so House Bill 1168, it's made available to the public, of course, and you can Google it and find it very easily if you just type in Washington State House Bill 1168, and it'll pop right up, and you can read it yourself. And it talks a lot about wildfire. So that's what that's kind of why I'm here today. House Bill 1168. And anyway, the Service Forestry program, it's kind of unique in the sense that it's a government program, a state agency program, but it revolves around the private landowner. So as a service forester, we really deal with private landowners for the majority of our job, of our daily workday. We'll go out on site visits and visit private landowners and their forested land, and gives some assessments like Michael mentioned, the fire ignition zone. I still have a lot to learn about that, but that's a part of the program. So we can offer, some advice on that, oh yeah, your woodshed is too close to your home, that sort of stuff. Or yeah, you might want to consider thinning trees around your property, the closer you get to your house, and so forth. So it's pretty unique in the sense that we're government agencies, but we're working for you directly, the private landowner. And there's two real big facets to this program. Excuse me, I'm going to try sharing my screen here. Nothing fancy, so sorry about that. But the two big facets are that we offer financial assistance and technical assistance. And that technical assistance part is, again, I already kind of talked about that, how we will visit your property if you invite us out there, and we can give you some advice on how you may be able to improve your forest conditions, or the conditions of your forest. Maybe you have some invasive species that you weren't aware of, like English holly, for example. I have lived in Washington all my life and just found out a few years ago that it's an invasive species. So, so we all have stuff to learn, and the more us service foresters learn, the more we may be able to offer some advice and potentially help you improve your forest land. And that financial assistance facet, if you will, that's a very a big part of our program and a big part of my job. So we'll through this program, we have a lot of money available to help landowners reduce the fuels around their home. That's one part of it. And then the second part is just to increase their forested land in terms of forest health too. So this financial assistance aspect, it's another way we describe it or call it is it's a cost share program. So for those of you who aren't aware of what cost share is well, for example, if a landowner has a stream running through their property and they want to put a road over that, and they're legally allowed to, or they're allowed to, they're able to, if they wanted to put a nice culvert, which is basically a pipe underneath the road to let the water flow through, then when cost share, that gets involved, because the government or any type of local agency may be able to provide a certain amount of money for that project to be successful and to be implemented. So the other half of the funds or whatever amount you need to pay is coming out of the landowner's pocket. But again, the rest of the funds will be provided by whatever local agency is involved. And so for this program, in light of forest health and fuels reduction, we offer up to 50% of cost share assistance for a handful of treatments to improve your forest lands, such as, well, and removing invasive species. So if you wanted to do that, then we could help you out financially. And of course, the technical assistance goes hand in hand with that, because we can point out what you might need to work on, or what you may be interested in removing for the betterment of the landscape. Invasive species removal, if you need to thin your forest because you, again, want to reduce the fuel loads, or B, want to improve the general health of your forest. Light thinning has been proven to be very beneficial for both of those categories, fuels reduction and forest health. So again, we can offer, we can help you, well, with some financial assistance in that regard. So invasive species removal, thinning out your forest, removing slash, which is just excess woody debris. We can help you out with that financially. If you want to plant trees, and say if you want to like reclaim a field and turn it back into, maybe it was historically a forested area, we can absolutely help you with that. And that's, well, I'll share the numbers, those financial rates, just in a second here. And then the pruning your trees too around your home, or even throughout your forest, if it makes sense, we can offer or provide some money for that as well. And then prescribed fire too, which is definitely a topic of growing popularity. It's a part of this program, although for the Olympic region, which is the majority of the Olympic Peninsula, nobody has actually implemented a prescribed fire project, and that is sort of thanks to the powers that be, and I guess the general lack of interest for private landowners. We haven't had too many people coming to us who's expressed a great interest in that. There's been a handful, but unfortunately it hasn't been enough to really turn the eyes of the upper management. So if you're interested, bug me about it, and I'll bug my managers. So and so yeah, I keep saying improve the forest, your forested conditions, but what do I mean by that? I guess I kind of touched up on that already, but I really do just mean, if you want to remove invasive species, or thin out your forest for the betterment of your forest, or remove slash. We're not trying to come in there and say, hey, you have to do this, and if you don't do it, we're gonna come at you. It's definitely not that. It's totally, if you're interested in working with us, then we want to help you out too. And that's the general basis of this program. And there's different agencies have different ways of dealing with their land and how they manage their land. Of course, there's private timber, which they kind of do their own thing, and so a lot of it's very good. Some of it not so much, but we won't go there. The National Forest Service, they have a history of managing their lands. That's pretty interesting. And the national park too, they of course manage their own lands in their own way, and state lands, which is DNR. We do our best to make it as safe as possible for everyone. We're not trying to start forest fires, or we're not trying to make these outrageous conditions where a forest fire could break out, suddenly. But the goal of this program is to really reach the private landowner, that sector, and we're trying to really encourage private landowners to to help manage their lands and again, for the betterment of the entire landscape. So that's really the bottom line of this service forestry program. And oh, and excuse me, I kind of forgot to touch up on what a shaded fuel break is. So I got some pictures. Oh boy, let me see if I can move this out of the way here. Okay. So this is another treatment that we offer financial assistance on. Oh, that's the after photo. Oopsie, I spoiled the surprise. Okay. A shaded fuel break, that's it's a fuel break. You know, Michael mentioned, he sort of touched up on or mentioned about talked about what a fuel break was, such as like a gravel road, you know, that just helps slow down, if not inhibits, the spread of wildfire or fire in general. And so not everyone wants to, you know, turn their forest into a gravel lot. As effective as it would be for stopping fire, that would also, you know, defeat the purpose of keeping your lands forested, which is the goal of this program as well. We're all about keeping the lands forested. So a shaded fuel break is the best of both worlds, and this is the before photo. This is out on the East Squim.
Hey, Raleigh, I don't think we're seeing that.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you for. New share. Okay, thank you. Yep. Okay. Can you see that now by chance? Okay, thank you. So yeah, pretty brushy. You know, it's the understory here. Can you by chance see my mouse too when I move it, my cursor?
Yep.
Okay, right on. Thank you. So yeah, the understory is very clearly dense. And it's more dense on the outside here next to the road. I don't know if you can see that in the corner here. It's right on the side of the road. And naturally, it's a bit more dense because it's got more exposure to sunlight. But if you can peek in here too, it's pretty dense all throughout the forested area. And then, of course, you got your forest, which is pretty dense as well. So it's just it's quite the mess. And, you know, in the heat of August, it could, well, it definitely would be a threat for, well, a wildfire. If one were to start here, it would have no problem spreading. And so a shaded fuel break is, okay, I'll try my best here to see what I got. This is the after photo of that same strip of land. And as you can see, a lot of the understory brush was removed. It's not super easy to tell, but a lot of these trees were thinned out too. And this, of course, will, you know, inhibit or slow the spread of fire if, God forbid, one were to break out along this road. And this particular treatment is, oh, I'm kind of rambling on here. Okay, I'll try to hurry up. But this particular treatment is touches up on or involves several treatments that one could potentially get financial assistance for. So just to name a few of them, well, I'll name them all. So it involves pre-commercial thinning, which is the fancy way of just thinning out your forest, light thinning. Pruning your trees. In this case, it wasn't really necessary since they're all Doug fir, and Douglas fir has a tendency to self-prune itself if it's grown in a dense stand like that. Slash abatement. So they got rid of all the slashes. You can see here, there's hardly any downwoody debris. And then the brush control too. So in this case, it's brush control. It was not in regards to invasive species removal, but it also included native brush too, because this is specifically a shaded fuel break. So the goal, again, of course, is to slow the spread of fire and just to really decrease any type of chance that a fire could break out or spread through this area. And these are strategically placed, you know, along busy roadsides or around a busy structure, maybe your home if you really want to be prepared. It's more than appropriate to do this. It's a lot of work though, which is again why we offer financial assistance for those who are interested. And okay, I'll try to speed things up. There are two routes in which a landowner can address these types of work, or this work. They can either hire a contractor to do the work, and the DNR will offer some cost share assistance for that, or they can do the work themselves and they can get compensated for their time. So there's two routes there. They can do the work themselves or hire somebody else to do it. And either way, they will get money as long as they follow our treatment specifications. And well, I guess I'm kind of running out of time, so forgive me, but I have a few more things I could touch up on, and I'll just one more minute here. The service forestry program is a part of a bigger umbrella of programs that can be well, it's titled the Small Forest Landowner Assistance Office. And this office, if you will, it's not an office, but just a conglomerate of programs. They offer several different beneficial programs to private landowners. So the service forestry program is just one aspect of it. There's also the regulation assistance program, which if you're interested, if you're a small forest landowner, which by definition, that's if you own 5,000 or less acres of timberland. I know it's a pretty sizable chunk there. Then you qualify to your small forest landowner as far as the DNR is concerned. And if you are interested in harvesting timber, then you can contact a regulation assistance forester for the Olympic region. It's a brand new employee. He just got hired on. John Schmeltz, I believe I'm saying that correctly. That's his name. His contact info should be on the DNR website at this point, and he will help you with all the details you need to know. So that's one program, for example. If you have a stream running through your property and you are, as far as the law is concerned, not allowed to harvest that timber, then you can potentially be eligible to enroll in the forestry riparian easement program. And what that is that if you, say the law says you can't harvest that nice big alder in that stream, right by that stream. Well, that's okay. If you get enrolled in this program, then you will get compensated for that standing timber. Or sorry, I shouldn't say timber at all because it's not going to be cut down. But we can give you money for that standing, those trees there that you can't harvest, but the wood is there, and gosh darn it, you really want to harvest it, but you can't. Anyways, you'll get compensation for that if you enroll in that program and are eligible. So those are just a few programs to give you some examples, but I highly recommend it if you have forest land and are interested in getting some benefits from the state. Check out the Small Forest Landowner Office. Let's see. Got the plug for it right here. I guess that tiny link at the bottom there. Sorry if you can't see that very well, but there's the website link. Yeah, anyway. Feel like there's a better page coming up here with more. Okay, nope, sorry. Well, that's what you get. Okay. There's that link right there at the bottom. And I'll pass this info on to Karina if anyone's interested, of course. And I think that's my time. So any questions? I'll stop sharing here.
Thanks so much to you both. Anyone have questions for Michael or Raleigh?
I'll try a question. So I'm a big fan of helping people understand the risks. And we have a kind of a unique situation that baffles me up here, is that we want people to focus on the real risks, but I find that so many people we run into up here have the vision of a wildfire like they see on TV, or they moved here from California. So someone has a campfire 5 miles away, and then the people are thinking, well, we're going to have to evacuate 5 miles away from that fire within, a half an hour of the time that fire started. So they're thinking Paradise Fire or something like that. And I want to communicate to people that we need to have the defensible space. We need to do the things like not planting things under your eaves, especially juniper bushes, because that's what's burning the houses down here. But I also want people not to panic at having some trees around their property or something like that. I really like what he was talking about the forestry service there. And that's how I haven't figured out. I wonder if either of our speakers, who are fantastic tonight, by the way, if they have ways that they communicate to people, kind of that paradox up here where we don't necessarily, when we have a wildfire up here so far in our climate change era here, so far, it doesn't really go that fast like they're used to seeing on the television. So giving them some reality, but without removing their caution to follow all the rules for defensible spaces. Complicated enough for you?
Yeah, it's very nuanced. So I think 99% of the time, John, it's like you're talking about, that it's largely slow moving, stuff like that. But we're not exempt either. Like the east wind events will have potential to create firestorm type events, but those are the anomaly. And I guess education, where people, the big one that I get is I deal with burn permits through the winter. And so when it's raining and wet everywhere and people are burning industrial piles, so there's fire, you can see, because of the peninsula, you can see a lot of places. So folks might see flames on the hillside, but it's been raining a ton the last few days. So the chances of that being an uncontrolled wildfire are slim. And even if it is an uncontrolled wildfire, the chances of it going very far in those extremely wet conditions are slim. If it does progress, it's going to do so very slowly. So yeah, I would just encourage people to kind of evaluate their surroundings. Are there gale force winds? Have we been dry for several months or several weeks even? These are things to create those bigger watch outs when things start compounding like that. But if it's been raining on and off and there's a fire, it's good to be cautious about it and report it, certainly. But panic doesn't get people far, generally speaking. So I'd encourage not to panic, but to think. Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, in fact, it did just what I needed to hear. That watch out concept is a perfect way to explain that. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Well, thank you to Michael and Raleigh for being with us tonight and sharing this important information. I've taken detailed notes and plan to go home and take a look at my zones. So thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us here for Be FireWise at Home. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a
Feel
lot.
free to contact us with any additional questions.